He swore she'd break him, and still the rancher pulled her close. They found her broken in the dust, a note pinned to her dress that read, "She'll break you. Don't let her live." But when the rancher lifted her into his arms, he sealed a fate more dangerous than any bullet. Because in the Wild West, sometimes the greatest threat isn't the men chasing you, it's the woman you can't let go of. The storm had left the land raw and wild, the sky bruised purple above the plains. Dust still swirled in restless spirals when the rancher saw her, collapsed in the dirt, dress torn, hair tangled with grit. But it wasn't her silence that stopped him. It was the note, pinned to her bodice with a rusted brooch, scrawled in a jagged hand. "She'll break you. Don't let her live." For a long moment he just stood there, breath shallow, the wind tugging at his hat brim. He should have turned his horse away, left her to the fate whoever had abandoned her intended. But something in her face, bruised yet unbowed, snared him. She opened her eyes, pale blue beneath lashes caked with dust, and whispered a single word. "Please." He dismounted, boots crunching, each step heavy as iron. He had buried men for less. He had seen enough of betrayal to know when it was written plain, yet his hands moved against every warning in his gut. He cut the brooch loose, crumpled the note, and lifted her carefully. Her ribs felt sharp under his grip, her breath shallow but alive. The horse shifted, uneasy. Coyotes yipped from the ridge, sensing weakness. The rancher muttered under his breath, half to the woman, half to himself, "You'll break me? Then you'll have to try." He laid her across the saddle, swung up behind, and pulled her close. She flinched at first, then sank into his chest with the faintest sigh, as though she'd been running too long to resist warmth. The prairie opened wide before them, endless scrub, a horizon smeared in firelight and silence so thick it could strangle a man. He pressed her closer, as much shield as prison, every nerve wired for the sound of pursuit. For if someone had left her with such a warning, someone else would surely come to claim her. And already beneath the cry of the wind, he thought he heard it. A faint drum of hooves, far but steady. By the time the rancher reached his homestead, the night was deep and brittle. A single lantern swung on the porch beam, its glow casting long shadows across the corral fence. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, carrying her inside like a man smuggling fire into dry brush. He set her gently on the narrow cot near the hearth. The flames inside the stove spat and hissed, warming the cold edges of her skin. She stirred, murmuring words he couldn't catch, words tangled in fear. Her hands trembled as though she still felt ropes biting her wrists. He fetched a basin, water gone lukewarm, and a clean rag. His rough fingers dipped the cloth, then wiped dust and blood from her face. She winced but didn't pull away. For a man who had known only calluses and cattle, the act felt dangerous in its quietness. "Drink," he said simply, holding a tin cup to her lips. She obeyed, water spilling a little down her chin. Their eyes met then, his dark and steady, hers wary and hollow. In that moment, he knew the note had spoken a half-truth. She would break him. But not with betrayal, with the unbearable weight of trust. Outside, the night carried whispers, a coyote's cry, the creak of the barn door shifting in the wind, and then, so faint he almost doubted his ears, the echo of distant hoofbeats. He froze, hand tight on the cup, head tilted. Riders, moving closer. She must have heard it too. Her fingers tightened suddenly around his wrist, a grip sharp with terror. "They'll come," she rasped. "They always come." He laid her back against the pillow, tucking a quilt over her trembling frame. "Let 'em," he murmured, his jaw hard as oak. "This house has weathered storms before." He blew out the lantern, leaving only the glow of the stove, and stood watch at the window. The land outside was nothing but ink and silence, yet the hoofbeats pressed on, a ghostly drum in the marrow of the night. And in that silence, he knew the chase had already begun. Dawn came slow, pouring gold over the ranch like spilled whiskey. The stranger woke with a start, breath quick, eyes darting as though she expected chains. Instead, she found a bowl of stew on the table, steam curling into the morning air. He was outside, chopping wood, every strike of the axe echoing through the valley. When she stepped onto the porch, clutching the quilt around her, he didn't look up at first. But he felt her there. The way the air shifted, the way silence thickened. "You should eat," he said, voice flat but edged with something softer. She obeyed, spoon trembling in her hand. He watched her from the doorway, the quilt still clinging to her shoulders like armor. As the hours crawled, the bond between them wove itself, not with words, but with the quiet weight of survival. He mended her torn dress with clumsy stitches. She fed the chickens, her movements cautious but steady. He showed her how to patch a fence, guiding her hands, their skin brushing. Small acts, nothing more, and yet everything. That night by the fire, she spoke at last. "They won't stop. Not until I'm ashes." Her voice cracked like brittle glass. He leaned forward, shadows carving lines across his face. "Then they'll ride through me first." Her eyes shimmered with something close to disbelief. No man had ever said such words to her. No man had ever meant them. She reached out just for a heartbeat and touched the scar on his forearm. He didn't move, didn't flinch. The wind outside carried more than cold. Tracks had been left in the dirt beyond the ridge, fresh ones. He had seen them that afternoon, pressed deep and hurried. Riders were close now, too close. He banked the fire, letting the room fall into flicker and shadow. And in that hush, with the woman dozing by the hearth, he whispered more to the air than to himself. Out here in the Wild West, every choice carried a price. If this tale has gripped you so far, make sure to ride with us. Subscribe now, because the next twist may change everything. The flames snapped, as if sealing his vow. The storm broke just before dusk. Not rain, but riders. 5 of them. Black silhouettes cresting the ridge, their rifles catching what little light bled through the clouds. The rancher spotted them first from the loft, eyes narrowing, every muscle wound tight. He strode inside, rifle in hand. "They're here," she paled, clutching the quilt like a shield. "You don't know what they'll do." "I know enough." He pressed the weapon into her hands, rough but steady. "If I fall, you don't hesitate." Her breath hitched. She had never fired iron before, but his tone left no room for argument. Outside, hooves thundered closer, rattling the earth like a coming storm. The dogs barked, cattle pressed against the fence in panic. The very air seemed to hold its breath. The first rider shouted, voice sharp with command. "Send her out, or we burn you alive." The rancher stepped onto the porch, coat flaring with the wind, rifle leveled steady. "This land's mine. You cross it, you pay." The standoff lasted heartbeats too long. Then steel cracked. A bullet slammed into the porch beam, splinters raining down. The rancher answered with fire, dropping the lead rider in the dirt. Chaos erupted, horses screaming, men shouting, gunfire splitting the dusk. She crouched inside, hands shaking, the rifle heavy against her chest. Then she saw it. One rider circling to the barn, torch in hand. Without thinking, she raised the weapon, squeezed, and fire roared. The man tumbled, torch dying in the mud. Her own scream followed, part terror, part release. The rancher fought like a storm himself, bullets, fists, raw fury. But numbers pressed hard, and soon one rider's revolver was at his back. She burst from the doorway then, quilt cast aside, hair whipping in the wind. Her voice cut through the chaos. "Don't you touch him!" The rider hesitated, just long enough. The rancher drove his elbow back, seized the gun, and ended it. The silence that followed was thick as smoke. 4 men lay still, the 5th galloping away into the dark horizon. But as the dust settled, her eyes locked on his, and in them the truth broke open like thunder. He had chosen her, even against death. Morning light spilled across the plains, soft as a prayer. Smoke curled from the stove, drifting through the open door. The yard bore scars of the night before, spent shells glinting in the dirt, blood darkening the grass. The rancher leaned on the porch rail, hat in hand, shoulders heavy but unbroken. She stepped out quietly, her borrowed dress torn at the hem, her hair tangled, but her eyes steady now. For the first time since he found her in the dust, she looked less like a hunted ghost and more like a woman alive. "They won't stop," she whispered. The horizon seemed endless, a road of fire and dust. "You tied yourself to my fate." He studied her, jaw clenched, silence stretching between them. Then he spoke, voice rough as gravel. "You're right. I swore once I'd never let anyone close. That oath's broken now." Her hand trembled as she reached for his, but he didn't pull away. Their fingers locked together, simple and final. The West might tear them apart tomorrow, but this dawn, they chose each other. The rancher pulled her close, not with gentleness, but with a fierce certainty, as if daring the world to break them. She leaned against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm stronger than the hoofbeats that still echoed faint on the wind. Beyond the ridge, danger would rise again. Men would come. The fight wasn't finished, but the land had shifted. He was no longer alone, and neither was she. The prairie stretched wide, endless, and unforgiving. Yet in that vastness, something tender had rooted, fragile, defiant, alive. And if her courage and his vow stirred something in you, don't let this story end here. Out here in the Wild West, love is scarcer than water, but it always finds a way. Ride with us. Like this tale, subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss the next trail of love and survival. The wind carried their silhouettes across the dawn, two figures bound together against the horizon's fire.